My name is Diana Figueroa. My father is Carlo Figueroa, and he was killed in March of 2003. He was beaten to death on March 2nd, and he died on March 4th of 2003, and he was assaulted behind the Pep Boys automotive store on 22nd and 6th Avenue. Now for me, I'm just a year younger than my dad was when he was killed. It's hard to imagine that he died at such a young age. So the hard part is, as you go through the years, it's been 21 years, and you can go through therapy, you can seek support groups, you can get help, but you never ever give up on your loved one. You may say, I'll put that on the back burner. I don't need this anymore. It's done. He's gone. Nothing's going to bring him back. But the what ifs, those are very haunting. The what ifs. What if somebody does know something? What if they're too afraid to speak up? What if I were to find out who did this? Would that bring me closure? Don't know. I'm afraid to find out, but at the same time, I do want to know. So it being a cold case has been extremely difficult because it seems like every few years over the last 21 years, I have visited the possibility of getting this out there in the community and begging people to speak up. If you know anything, please say something. If you saw something, if you heard something, you know, the homeless community is a close-knit community. People talk and people know what's going on out there on the streets. My biggest fear right now is that the clock is ticking and people are dying because of age or other things, but thinking that my dad would be 74 years old, if the people who are around his same age at that time, they're getting older and people are dying. So I feel like I'm running out of time. And as I get older, I feel like I'm running out of time too, because I may die never knowing who did this. And I have to come to peace with that. And it's hard. Because you start to find peace, and then all of a sudden you get trapped, you get caught back in this loop of the what ifs and that hope. And you want to push the hope aside, but you really never give up hope. So March 4th, 2003, in the trauma unit at the hospital, and we'd taken Dad off of life support, and he died late that night. My children were at their grandparents' house, and I went home and I thought it was all a bad dream. Woke up the next morning kind of in a fog, just pinching myself like this didn't just happen. The last 48 hours did not just happen. This has to be a dream. This is a nightmare. This is not real. Like I felt very disconnected. And so I remember going to the living room and I sat in the recliner, and I remember I turned on the TV and my dad's photo was all over the news, and encouraging people to call 911 or radiate crime or with any information they had. Had to pick up my children, and my dad helped me a lot with my kids. Went places with us, go to the grocery store. He help me watch the kids outside while they were playing in the little pool. He would teach them woodwork, painting. In his words, he was trying to make up for lost time that he lost with my brother and I. So I had to explain this to an 8, 7, and a 4-year-old that Tata's gone. Picked up my kids at their grandparents' house and had to explain what had happened, and he was hurt and he was no longer with us. Go home, and people were kind and gracious and trying to share their sympathy and condolences in the way they knew how. And my kids were confused because you'd open the front door and there were cards, candles, balloons, food, and I'm very, very grateful the neighborhood came together and were bringing over tamales, beans, rice, you name it, pan dulce, they were bringing over, and so, so grateful. But you go outside and you sit by yourself in the stillness of what stillness you could find during that time without a neighbor walking by or coming to check on you while you were sitting outside just staring at all these cards and flowers, and then it's gone. You're left holding the bag, trying to figure out how to get through this. A few weeks had passed and I had found out one of my cousins was being deployed to Baghdad, and we had a picnic. And I remember one of my tias saw me and she saw I wasn't eating, and I hadn't slept a full night's sleep in a few weeks. My eyes were sunk in. I was just wasting away because I couldn't eat. I was in shock. I couldn't talk. I couldn't interact. One of my aunts had encouraged me to see a doctor. I went to a doctor, and he said this is called post-traumatic stress. And he gave me antacids because I couldn't eat. He gave me medications to help sleep, medications to help with anxiety, medications to help with all these medications. I had never taken medication. So I remember I took one because I remember how important he said it was to sleep, but I couldn't go to sleep because I was having nightmares. And I tried to stay awake at night, keep myself awake, because I didn't want to go to sleep because the images in my head. Wasn't reliving what had happened to my dad. I was having dreams that this was happening to my children. So I took one of the medications and I woke up 2 days later. And I threw all the medications in the garbage because I needed to make sure that my children were taken care of and protected, and I, first and foremost, was a mother. So I had to put everything else on the back burner and figure out how to take care of myself and how to navigate this grief and trauma. How to take care of my kids. They had so many questions and I had zero answers for them. So a few weeks go by, because he wasn't buried until 10 days after he died. So after he died, I was on leave of absence from work, and I was canvassing the streets with flyers and just asking people left and right, do you know anything? Do you know anything? Do you know anything? Just, I was out there questioning people. Do you know? What did you see? What did you hear? Stapling flyers everywhere. And then I think it gets really uncomfortable. People don't know what to say. They don't know how to comfort you. They don't know what the right words are. Because everything sounds so cliche. He's in a better place now. You don't have to worry about him anymore on the streets. You don't have to worry about him being hungry or cold or too hot or if he has water No, I don't. You're right. I don't. But I understand they came from a good place. They were trying to console me how they knew how. It didn't make me feel any better. Because I knew. And he knew if he wanted to come home, he could. And he had a place to sleep. And he could have water. And he had clothes. And he had a shower. He had what he needed. So yeah, you're left holding the bag after you've been bombarded with all of these flowers, all of these cards, the news. And initially, I have to take accountability for this because initially the news really didn't put anything in there. It was a blurb this big that said, 4th murder this year, 4th homicide of the year. Homeless man beaten to death behind automotive parts store. That's when I blew up and I thought, no. If this were a doctor or a lawyer or somebody high up in high status, it would be everywhere that they were looking for this person. No, you're not gonna minimize my father because he was out on the streets. Don't. Contacted and the paper, and they ended up coming out and doing a full 2 pages inside of the newspaper on him. Because I said this was a father. This was my Nana's son. She held him as a baby. Can't even imagine. His siblings, his friends, and he served his country and he served it proudly. He was extremely proud of his military service. And during that time, during the late 60s, early 70s, that was a pretty rough time for our veterans, right? So over the years, it's helped me to understand in working with veterans and in working with different populations, right? And learning a lot more in depth more about psychology, abnormal psychology, addiction, trauma, tragedy. I've learned to look at things in a different view, right? Different light. And it kind of helped me understand where my dad, I'll never really know where he was coming from. He wasn't a bad man. He was addicted to alcohol. That was his thing. And when he was sober, he was amazing. He was so intelligent, and he was so funny, so helpful. So yeah, what do you do with that? All the media's gone, or all the flowers and the balloons are gone, and you're just sitting there by yourself with your own thoughts and your own nightmares and trying to get through it. Very fond memories of my father. He was very, very, very much a nature, outdoorsy guy, and would take my brother and I out. Favorite places: Sabino Canyon, Mount Lemmon, Madera Canyon. And he spent so much time teaching us about the outdoors and survival stuff, military training, that I think just stuck with him. And how to find water, what does this cactus do, what does that do, and his fast cars that he loved, the talent that he had in fixing things, just the sitting and talking. And my dad wasn't the best father, but he was my father. And by saying that he wasn't the best father, was he had his moments with the addiction where it got the best of him, and we didn't know where he was going to be at. And then he was sober, and it was great. But nobody can take those moments away from me. Taking off to Sabino and going and swimming all day long with his little radio playing, and we used to be able to, back then, drive up to Sabino Canyon. You can't anymore. But making carne asada, making hot dogs, just eating. The family would be up there, his brothers, his sisters, like the kids, we'd all be playing and swimming all day long. And I miss that so much. So my dad would, there was never ever a doubt in our mind, as far as my brother and I are concerned, that my dad wouldn't do anything to protect us. My dad made sure that we were safe, and I miss that, you know. I miss that a lot, because that was his way of showing us that he loved us. For the first year, at least, I don't really recall the glimpses of light or hope. It was a pretty rough time. I was dealing with that, and then also going through a divorce. So it was a lot of change for the kids and I. So for people to say, I want to say probably the best thing was having somebody sit with you in silence and not saying a word. Just holding your hand and just being with you, because really there is nothing anybody can say that's going to lessen the pain. I'd like to say, oh sure, somebody said this, it made me feel better, and it made me, no, it didn't. In that moment, it felt better just to have somebody sit next to you and be with you and acknowledge or admit, I don't know what you're going through. I've never been through this, but I'm here. That's all it took. I'm here. To know that that persons were there, that was great, but my circle was so small and I had isolated so much. I really didn't have that. I pushed so many people away, and I was trying to focus on my kids. Again, I take accountability for that, because again, I didn't know how to get through this. I had very few friends. My mother was always my rock. My mom and dad had their differences, and they divorced when I was young. And she'd always say, I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. And that was your father. And I always told you, no matter what, that'll always be your father. And you're stronger than you know. You'll make the right decisions for what's best for you. So, again, I think that hope was just, I'm here for you. Like, you need to sit, talk in silence, just be. That was the best for me. What we need to recognize and what we need to know is no matter what kind of tragedies or trauma you have, when you have something like this, it kind of exasperates and it just piles on to any other traumas, right? And again, whether you saw things that were violent as a child, and children are resilient, but still our brains are not equipped to process and handle that much trauma. Now looking back, I see the ripple effect and how the effect that it had on my kids. Their little brains didn't know how to process that. And sure, they went and I put them in therapy. Homicide Survivors helped us a lot. They referred us to Tulidito. That was absolutely fantastic. You know, they had the little rage room, and they were still trying to figure out, like, what's going on? Why are we here? This is a cool place. We're doing artsy things. Well, mom's in the adult room. You know, we get to play with volunteers and do things. They were trying to figure it out, too, as to why they were there. The part that we don't get as a society, as a whole, is the mental illness and the lack of resources for people living with mental illness. Whether the mental illness was something that was brought on, and you say mental illness and immediately people go to the word crazy, right? Don't like that word. Anxiety, panic attacks, depression. I've seen it in other survivors. I've seen it in my children, and later in life, I'm seeing it in myself. I've had other things that have compounded, hearing loss and stuff that has kind of affected that too. But being fidgety, different little things, you know. Feeling trapped in a room, trying to get out, constantly scanning a crowd to make sure everybody looks safe. How can I get out of this situation? What if somebody does this? What if this happens? What if that happens? My brain is constantly on, how am I going to get out of this situation? I need to have a plan A, plan B, plan C all the time. That's not normal. I don't know what is normal. I don't know what is, but that I'm getting better. I do have help. It's talk therapy and EMDR. And I've gotten to the point now where I can actually sit in a restaurant with my back towards the door. I don't have to sit facing the door to make sure who walks in and who walks out and how am I going to get out of here or something, where to go. My kids, on the other hand, not so much. It has affected them and their lives deeply. So when you see the traumas, generational trauma, and let's say one of my kids decides to go for help, they want to go see somebody. Well, if you don't have insurance or if you don't have $300 for a session or however much it costs, then we can't see you. So that's a huge thing. You know, I had a job where everything was end stigma, actually encouraging people to seek help. It's okay, we all need help. We cannot survive this world alone. We actually are communal species. We need to be with each other and help each other to get through this life. On that note, just how much he means to my brother and I, and his siblings. And again, coming and asking the community, because I feel like the time is just slipping and the clock is ticking, and please, 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 if you know anything at all, knew somebody that might have known somebody, knew somebody that might have seen something, know somebody who might have heard something, conversations, anything, please, please come forward and share that information, even if you think it's, oh, that's just, that's probably irrelevant, or no, anything would help to connect any dots that we could possibly, any information to help solve this. Because I do hold hope in my heart that before my time is done here on Earth, hopefully I have another 30, 40 years left on this Earth, that this gets solved. But for the people that were surrounding him, and if they were around his age, I know that the time is running out a lot faster than it is. We never know, right, when our time's up. But that's the point I want to get across, is please, please, please come forward, say something now, and help us finally just to lay this to rest and let more healing continue.